I mean, just a quick update from Gaza, since we haven't met in over a week here. As we mentioned, 3 of Ismail Hania's sons were killed. Professor Morandi points to this as an example of Israeli weakness. Another example of Israeli weakness took place almost on the precise 6-month anniversary of October 7th. And this was the withdrawal of the 98th Division of the Israeli military from Khan Yunis, where they'd been taking fairly heavy casualties. This was, these are Palestinians who are heading back to Khan Yunis to their homes. So this is I don't see any other way of viewing this except as a defeat for the Israeli military. Now, the Al-Qassam brigades or Al-Quds, the resistance factions in Gaza, they don't function like a traditional military. They're not holding ground. It's not like, the Battle of Bakhmut, where the Ukrainian and Russian militaries were holding specific neighborhoods and fighting in a kind of trench warfare. What they were doing was simply ceding entire areas to Israel, allowing these soldiers to go. I mean, there's nothing they can do to prevent soldiers from going into people's homes and sniffing their children's sweat socks, as we've seen footage of recently this week of this perverted army supported by ultra conservatives like Chris Rufo and Ben Shapiro. They can't prevent that, but what they can do is raise the cost of them being there. And if you parse the coverage of Israel's occupation of Khan Yunis in southeastern Gaza, what you'll see, and the withdrawal of the 98th Division, what you'll see is a lot of references to Israel being unable to maintain their presence because of the fear of taking more bodies. And what we saw in 48 hours before Israel's withdrawal was a very well executed ambush by Al-Qassam. This is all over their channels. I'm not going to show it now because it raises our risk of being even further suppressed and demonetized. And they took out 4 soldiers, through a tunnel ambush. This is what's been happening day after day. So they're gone. Now what Israel's trying to do is possibly create the context for invading Rafah by relieving some of the pressure on the refugee population there, allowing them to come back to Khan Yunis. But as Mohammed Marandi, our guest, pointed out, invading Rafah is going to be a lot more difficult than a much more concentrated area like Gaza City. So that's sort of the update. And this is not good for Israel. It's not a good look for its military after 6 months. Hamas is in full control of everywhere south of the Netzarim corridor that Israel's created to section off the north from central and southern Gaza. They're not going away. I don't know what the U.S. is thinking. Tony Blinken and so on still pushing this idea of regime change in Gaza. I think we can state clearly now it's not going to happen. The capacity, there were several rocket launches from Khan Yunis immediately after Netanyahu announced the destruction of all Hamas battalions in the area towards Eshkol in southern Israel. I mean, it's just not happening. So we're witnessing in real time the unmasking of the supposedly invincible Israeli army as a paper tiger that's capable of killing the sons of Hamas leadership and winning the war on babies and hospitals, but they're failing in all their goals. And of course, the hostages are not coming out through anything except the negotiation in Qatar.
And that's why they've destroyed every single university in Gaza. They've destroyed so many hospitals, including Gaza's largest hospital, Al-Shifa. By the way, a crime which is totally faded into the background.
Yep.
The Israeli pullback from Al-Shifa was just over a week ago, leaving hundreds of dead bodies and most of the complex destroyed. And how much media coverage of there was that? There was far more attention to the killing of the 7 Western or the 6 Western aid workers with World Central Kitchen. And understandably, that's obviously it's a huge atrocity. It deserves the attention, but destroying Gaza's largest hospital got a fraction of the coverage. And it just shows how the media is on board, and it shows how, exactly, Israel's not fighting a war against Hamas. It's just fighting a war against Gaza's civilians and their infrastructure.
I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, Al-Shifa is so key here because it was the beginning. Israel introduced this narrative that would enable it to destroy all hospitals and then begin to attack all the centers of life and create a humanitarian crisis immediately after October 7th with its fake infographic cartoon of the command and control centers of Hamas below Al-Shifa. And who was the U.S. journalist who really did the most to advance this? Just pop quiz.
Well, there's people within
New York Times. Yeah,
Jake Tapper. Jake Tapper.
Exactly. Beautiful. Yeah. You're the man. So yeah, I mean, Jake Tapper had his byline on a CNN piece claiming that the command and control center was directly under Al-Shifa. This was days before Israel's first invasion. And Jake Tapper, he's never addressed that his story has been completely debunked. And it created the context for some of the worst atrocities we've ever witnessed in our lifetimes. I mean, in a perfect world, Jake Tapper would be on trial in Nuremberg 2.0 for what he's done for this demonic regime. So that was never addressed. That's just never been addressed by Jake Tapper. It's one of the worst pieces of journalistic malpractice we've witnessed out of many since October 7th. And then we have the Israeli narrative of coming back to Al-Shifa. Like right now, as we speak, more corpses are being disinterred from the areas around Al-Shifa. People were executed. We're now learning about a 94-year-old who was burned alive in her home because Israel said evacuate, and now we're gonna torch the entire area. In fact, there's Jason Shawa, who we've interviewed before, who was evacuated from Gaza City with his family, has reported on Twitter that several of his elderly relatives were burned alive, killed in their homes, executed by Israel. I mean, these are just heinous Einsatzgruppen level atrocities, maybe beyond. I mean, it's just sickening. And Israel's narrative is that, well, Hamas had reconstituted itself around Al-Shifa, so they had to come back. Once again, this is a narrative of defeat. After 6 months, after you claimed victory, you claimed an operational hold with the Givati and Golani brigades in northern Gaza. You have to come back and kill everybody all over again and kill a bunch of elderly women in order to dislodge Hamas. You're never, ever going to win like that. And you will just, until you're stopped, you're just going to keep committing these massacres, playing whack-a-mole, trying to get Hamas out. So, I mean, we need to just kind of look at the bigger picture here, which is defeat for Israel, punctuated by more and more massacres. And I mean, Aaron, do you feel like this is well understood in Washington?
Well, yes. Another indication is that Biden finally had to not use U.S. leverage, but suggest that he would for the first time. Right. After saying before forever, John Kirby said there are no red lines. So Israel basically can do whatever it wants. And finally, in the last few days, they've had to finally change that narrative. They've had to say, if we don't see changes to Israel's behavior, then we might do something, which is still nothing, but it's more than what Biden was saying before, which is we'll definitely do nothing because Israel's no red lines. It can do whatever it wants. So I do think that's a reflection of just how horrified the world is with what Israel has done. I mean, it was galvanized by its slaughter of 6 Western aid workers. So we have to acknowledge that there was a racism factor in here, that it didn't matter when Israel slaughtered tens of thousands of Palestinians, but finally when they killed white people, that moved things. Even Biden now has been forced to slightly shift his rhetoric.